I'm Nick Knudsen, joined by Will Miles and special guest this week, the Hightop boys. We got Dave and Shelton with us here from Hightop Sports. Guys, thanks for joining the show tonight. Looking forward to jumping in here. We'll jump right into it because we got a ton to cover. It's game week. Miami week's finally here. Kickoff is on Saturday. Nashawn Montgomery commits. That wide receiver room getting a little more loaded. Actually, Shelton, I saw you do a nice little breakdown of that wide receiver room, building for the future here today. I saw you put out a little video earlier this afternoon. So we're recording Sunday night here. Montgomery is a nice addition to an already speedy wide receiver room. It's looking good for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I was space cowboyed up, ready to go for the big time commit and Nashawn Montgomery. It was the end of the trifecta is what I called it because Ben Hanks led that. We've had a few weeks of commits. Bryce Fitzgerald, we were hoping he went to Miami. Nashawn was going to close it out. So I think it leaps Florida up there in the recruiting class. I think top 20 or close to 20 and 247, top 20 and on three. And then, yeah, that wide receiver room, man, looking for what it looks like next year. It is something special. Nashawn, Vernell Brown, 5-star wide receiver on top of Joshua Moore, 6'5". I mean, we'll talk about some big size on the outside. Again, with Eugene Wilson, Aiden Mizell, Andy Jean, Hank Hawkins, Abrams, and then Tayshawn Jessley, 4-star tight end, will be coming in alongside Arliss Boardingham and Hayden Haydson. Boys, hey, if no maybe blocking, but there's gonna be some boys out there ready to catch the ball. All right, I'll tell you that it's gonna be nice.
Yeah, Dave is just a different situation with the speed on the outside from a couple years ago.
Yeah, I mean, like when you look at it, just the wide receiver room as a whole unit right now, I mean, when you got Mizell running like a 4.3, you got Eugene running 4.3s, Badge running 4.4, DK 4.4, Hawkins 4.2. I mean, that's right there, just 5 guys with just absolute speed that can burn you. And when you group those guys, obviously on the wide receiver field, you got 3 to 4 of those guys running around. That's really hard for any DB group to like have to guard in that situation. So just adding just with what we have on the roster and then adding in, your Vernell Browns, your Joshua Moores, your Montgomerys. I mean, this is turning out to be an elite wide receiver core that you can have for the future. Now, obviously, we talk about offensive line. We talk about all the other positions that Florida has not been, recruiting that well in. And like, look, if you're really, really good, and I know some offensive coordinators are really good at this, is scheming around maybe a bad offensive line. I mean, you throw one out into the flats to somebody that can run a 4.3 and you're about to get pressured and dunked on. I mean, that dude can take up the field, take up off the field real quick. So it can get you kind of out of those scenarios. Obviously, if you have Florida State's offensive line, then maybe not so much. But I think Florida's a little bit better than Florida State's offensive line if you saw anything this past weekend. So when you add all that talent just in that wide receiver core, I mean, like that's really exciting. We haven't had that kind of speed in a long time, probably ever since Urban Meyer was here. I know that haul that Dan Mullen had when he brought in Van Jefferson and Trevon Grimes from the transfer portal, along with Tyree Cleveland and all that. I think that's getting pretty close to what we kind of had in 2018. And now you're starting to see it culminate a little bit more in 2024. And that's really exciting for the Florida Gator offense and for somebody, a 5-star quarterback like DJ Lagway.
Worked a Georgia Tech reference in within the first 60 seconds. I love it. It will. Shelton mentioned it there, but we're talking about recruiting rankings. One of the things we talked about in the magazine through our maps section was South Florida is an area that has not been heavily recruited. At least we haven't landed guys from South Florida much in the first few classes. Billy Napier, another South Florida player in this class, wide receiver, another big-time wide receiver in state.
I mean, so Montgomery, 179th overall national rank according to the 24/7 Sports Composite, 30th ranked player in Florida, 18th ranked wide receiver. Very, very solid addition. This is a guy who you look at and say this is a welcome piece to the recruiting class. It's not like a crown jewel of a recruiting class, but the cool part is Florida's already got the crown jewel at the wide receiver position of the recruiting class with Vernell Brown, and so now you're starting to stack guys on top of that. So if Brown is a star and Montgomery turns out to just be sort of a supporting character, then that's a great haul for one recruiting class. If Montgomery turns into a star and Brown's a star, well, now all of a sudden you're talking about, the Riley Coopers and the Lewis Murphys and those sorts of things that Urban Meyer was able to tack on to the guys like Percy Harvin and the Bubba Caldwell, who he inherited from Ron Zook. So, look, Florida only 14 commits in this class so far, 24th overall in the 24/7 composite based on points. But if you look at average player rating, they're probably trending somewhere in the top 10, I would guess. Next week, Sanford week, so that's when we'll talk recruiting. in terms of sort of, I always write an article right when the season starts about where Florida stands, because that's usually kind of where every team ends up, is where they are right at this point. So this is a good get one guy right in at the buzzer, raise that overall recruiting ranking, and sort of give us some juice heading into the season.
Yeah, big asterisk on 2023, Will. Other than that, right? Other than that 2023, we don't have to talk about it. Let's not go into it. Shelton, one of the things you guys do really well over at High Top, the recruiting coverage is awesome. You guys do great recruiting coverage. Who else is on the radar here in the near future? Who are you hoping to see Florida land in the next month or so potentially?
Yeah, next month I think a lot's going to have to happen. What happens on the football field for Florida? I know a lot of big time commits are going to that Miami game. I know Malik Autry, lineman, will be there. He's currently committed to Auburn. Darquez Carter from Newberry, currently committed to Ohio State. Florida has constantly been in communication with him and will continue to be there. And look, I think Florida's a great land for him. I think a lot of these guys are just waiting to see what happens. I know there's from quarterback play, they're kind of eyeing it. So within the next month, I don't think there's a timeline for a lot of these guys. I think they're just going to see what happens. If Florida goes on its tears, up 4-0, 5-0, we could see some dominoes start to fall that have kind of quietly been in the background where Florida's eyeing them. Another one, I can't think of his name. Dave can probably remind me, the safety that recently committed to Miami. Stubbs? Yeah, Stubbs.
From Mandarin? Yep.
Stubbs was another one I think was a big Florida opportunity for Florida, and I think they could be there. The other one he's currently committed to, DJ Pickett, is I think he'll be at the Miami game as well, is someone to watch. Somebody that Florida was leading the way. It was an absolute lock from the very beginning. I remember when recruiting started for this class, DJ Pickett was the leader, and I was like, man, this is going to be sick. Then we lose. I'm drawing blanks today, boys. We lose our cornerback coach to LSU.
Corey Raymond.
Corey Raymond, thank you, sir. And obviously then he commits to LSU to stick with Corey Raymond, has a great relationship with Corey Raymond. But I think Will Harris has done a great job of getting him back into the mix. When the guys leave the team, I have so many names in my head, I have to make room. So I got to get rid of them. But yeah, I think those are the guys to watch in the next few months. And there might be some other guys. I know some offensive linemen are some names are being thrown around, but we've got a lot of work to do. We got to show it on the football field.
Yeah, Shelton, I think there's going to be a lot of Florida fans sitting down on about August 31st at 3:25 p.m. looking at the roster and learning some names for the first time. So I'm sure plenty of people are in that boat there, trying to keep track of all the transfers and everything. It's absolutely crazy. Dave, we saw Florida State go down in Ireland this weekend. We saw Georgia Tech pull the big upset.
Yeah, we did.
We did.
I saw it quite well if you were paying attention to my Twitter.
Cole Kublik, either last month or something, he used the phrase logo fever to describe our schedule. People maybe getting a little carried away with how great the schedule is and how tough the schedule is going to be. Personally, I still think the schedule is loaded, but that FSU game is one of those games at the end where people include that in that killer 5 set, right? So we see them actually play. We see the product on the field. It's game one, not to overreact to one game, but what do you think that loss can potentially teach us about the 2024 schedule going into the rest of the slate here?
I think, and me personally, and I'm not trying to diss anybody that covers college football nationally or anything like that, but I think a lot of these national people, and it's not all of them, but I think a lot of them over-exaggerate a lot of things that come into the season. It's like, if you had a good season before, they're automatically going to think you're going to be good the next season, no matter who you lost. And you see what happened to Florida State. Obviously, you look at DJ Uiagalelei, wasn't the best passer, and I think he's never had a season where he's passed over 2,700 yards. He barely, I think, teeters on the 60% completion rating. I think a lot of people, when he transferred to Florida State, they were just like, "Oh my God, Florida State's going to suck." Obviously, it has a lot more to do with just the quarterback. You got to have a good D-line, offensive line, everything. We didn't see a lot of that from Florida State, so it was just like, okay, well, was this just like, telling us the number one defensive lineman or one of the best defensive lines in the nation is going to be great, and then all of a sudden you find out they're hot dog water. You're going to find a lot of that out in week one. Who really is overhyped before preseason, and who actually wasn't overhyped and actually is good this season. That's what I love about week one, week two, week three, because you start to see the teams that, like, hey, look, we may have been preseason hyped. We may have been on the preseason Heisman watch list or something like that. And now, oh, well, maybe those teams aren't that good, and maybe we can beat those teams. So you look at the Florida State game, and, 6 weeks in, they could put it all together and be a totally different team. We saw what happened last year with Graham Mertz in the Utah game. As the season went on, Graham Mertz got into a rhythm, started to learn the system a little bit more, and he started being way more productive towards the end of the season. Unfortunately, he gets hurt in that Missouri game, separated shoulder, but you saw how productive Graham Mertz was, like how he started to just kind of assert himself in that offense. And I even said, I was just like, man, the Graham Mertz we saw at Missouri and South Carolina, man, I would love to see that at Utah again, because I think we could beat that team if we saw that. So it's one of those things where you can get preseason overhyped, but who's going to improve as the season goes on? And I think that's one of the things that I kind of like look at when I watch college football is who's overhyped, who's going to improve towards the season goes on, and who is just flat out good and just was never overhyped at all. And I think that's the cool thing about week one. And of course, I look at Miami and I look at all these other teams and I'm just like, okay, well, they're getting all this preseason hype, but are they really that good? And then you start trying to unfold some film, you try to start looking at it. And I knew personally that I didn't think Florida State was going to be that good this year. Like I literally was just saying they've lost a whole ton of talent. They got a new quarterback. They got a new running back too. It was just one of those things where I'm just like, I'm just waiting for that game to happen. And fortunately, it was the first game of the season, so I got to have some fun on Twitter. So we all got to, I guess, enjoy a rival that went 13-0 last year and said the Orange Bowl didn't count because
13-1,
a bowl record. We got to see them lose to two Georgia teams in the same, well, I guess, matter of months.
Well, one of the best tweets I saw after the game, Brent Key, number of ranked wins 5, Mike Norvell 4. What'd you think of Florida State yesterday?
Well, I mean, so I was at a party, so I had to break myself away from the party to go watch the game because I just sort of figured, Florida State probably win by 7-10 points, and maybe they'll make it interesting, but they'll figure out a way to pull it out. And what it really points out to me is that when you look at these teams in the middle of the pack, and you see this year after year, teams that don't recruit with the Ohio States, the Alabamas, the Georgias of the world require elite quarterback play in order to rise or fall. So Florida State caught lightning in a bottle with Jordan Travis. 2020 and 2019 a little bit, Florida caught lightning in a bottle with Kyle Trask, and you get big seasons and exciting seasons and the offense flying up and down the field. And you're like, oh my God, this guy's a miracle worker when that happens. Now, the other thing I take from it is that Florida State is locked into Mike Norvell until 2031. And you look at the recruiting, there wasn't a real bump at Florida State last year in their recruiting class, either in 2024, even this year in 2025, and they went 13-0 last year. And so that does sort of indicate to me that you got to start getting the job done on the recruiting trail when you have the opportunity, and you need that when you've got that quarterback in there. So, obviously there's a lot of excitement around DJ Lagway at Florida. That is the quarterback everybody's looking at. And that's the thing I think we need to be looking for on the recruiting trail at Florida is, can you get that pickup when DJ Lagway starts to excel? That might be one of the reasons why you should be excited about all these wide receivers. If he's sort of the Pied Piper who's bringing in all these wide receivers, hopefully he can become the Pied Piper who can bring a couple of 5-star offensive tackles as well. Now you're really starting to build something where it's sustainable even when the quarterback leaves, because that's what we learned on Saturday with Florida State is they have decided to try to paper over their holes with the transfer portal. And with a guy like Jordan Travis at quarterback, you can paper over those holes. With a guy like Uiagalelei at quarterback, you can't paper over those holes. And all of a sudden, those games that Florida State won last year early on when it was kind of close and they were sort of getting their sea legs, and then they started to dominate towards the end before Travis really got injured, all of a sudden you don't get those wins, right? They don't beat LSU last year with Uiagalelei at quarterback. Not a chance. And, I'm not even sure they beat Florida with Uiagalelei at quarterback if you've got Mertz in that game against Florida State last year. So, look, I think it's really hard to find special quarterback play. That's one of the reasons why, we, in our preseason magazine, even I, who am like the person who's like, just recruit. I don't care what else happens, recruit. Even I was sitting there going, maybe we need a little bit of patience here to make sure we don't run off DJ Lagway before we've seen what he can do. To me, that's the lesson that you learn by watching this, is that if you don't have elite quarterback play, you better be good everywhere else. And you can't just roll the ball out there and, go sightseeing in Dublin and then not show up to play. And that's what happened to Florida State. They got caught.
Yeah, you live by the portal, you die by the portal. It's tough it makes you appreciate, though, how many hits they actually had in the portal the last couple of years. They had an incredible hit rate. That's tough to do year in and year out. So if you have a little bit of a miss or it's just an average hit, then it is what it is. But like Shelton, I think we saw something else from that game too. We saw Haynes King at one point with the headsets, right? He's got the new headsets in the helmet. He can barely hear in Ireland. What is this swamp going to be like on August 31st for a quarterback making his first start with this team? A quarterback making his first start with these teammates. Cam Ward, he comes in with plenty of accolades, plenty of stats, but I'll tell you what, I think he's a solid quarterback. Put up a lot of numbers in a heavily pass-oriented offense the last few years. But first game in the swamp doesn't seem ideal with a new pair of headsets coming in.
I think what we saw in Dublin is exactly kind of what I've been preaching on our show. Is this is my excitement, my reason for hypeness for Florida. I mean, there's plenty of reasons why I can hype for Florida football, but Cam Ward's walking in not only to a unknown territory, an unknown style of college football. He's playing for a brand new offense, brand new weapons around him. Some of those guys are new to that offense as well. There's so many moving pieces, and this is where I'm very high on Florida as well, in the sense of lightning the bottle that Will just used. I talked about it with Tennessee 2 years ago. They were lightning the bottle, in my opinion. Everything synced up perfectly. It wasn't a shot, and like you said, Kyle Trask, I compared that Tennessee team, and I said FSU was lightning the bottle. Everything was ramped up to perfectly be in sync. That's okay. That's how it works. And if you don't recruit, you're unable to continue to move on. Like he also said, I think Florida is in a good place. I actually texted my FSU buddy who used to be part of our show. I said, hey, Florida reminds me similar to what FSU was last year. They've got the right pieces to do the right things. Can it translate onto the football field? That is left to be unknown. Look, we played Miami week 6 or week 7. I'm gonna have a completely different opinion, right? Cam Ward's gonna have time to get adjusted.
Mm-hmm.
We will know more about Cam Ward too, but I think he'll be able to get settled in. We have a full blown advantage here. The fact that Miami is still a 2.5-point favorite, I mean, look, I know I'm a Gator fan, but we've done the numbers. They're on paper, Florida's a more talented team. Quarterback wise, I mean, you can pick him out of a hat. I'm taking Graham Mertz any day of the week, but some could argue that Cam Ward's a little bit better. So where is the edge here? We've got the home field advantage. They must love Mario Cristobal way more than Billy Napier, and that is fine. But again, you're picking from a feeling, I don't think there's logical data behind the 2.5 points. It should be a pick'em game from a Vegas perspective. So I think it's a steal that it's 2.5 points. But yeah, I think Cam Ward's going to be a little razzled, and it just like Milton was last year when he headed to Florida. He's going to be a little razzled.
Well, we could do a little tie in here, a little shout out to Hightop. You guys have an Oregon channel, correct?
We do. We do.
Hightop Sports for Oregon there. Look, one of the things, obviously, Mario Cristobal, before he comes down to Miami, is at Oregon. He had a pretty good quarterback at Oregon by the name of Justin Herbert, but
quarterback killer.
We didn't really see Herbert's potential at Oregon. Cam Ward could be the best quarterback in college football potentially this year, but is he going to be the best quarterback in college football on Mario Cristobal's system? And I know they brought the guy in from Houston last year, and it should be more up tempo, but this is a guy who's used to throwing 40 passes a game coming from Washington State. Is he going to be allowed to be that quarterback that's going to be able to open it up to that degree? Are they going to adjust to him, or do you see them being more of a Cristobal style offense where they're going to run the ball, be a heavy focus on the run? They got some good running backs too and solid offensive line. So do you see those numbers coming down for Ward this year?
That's actually, I'm assuming you're still going to me, but that was what I brought up on our show on Wednesday was said, look, everyone's looking at Cam Ward. It's the running back room that scares me. They've got the top 10 offensive line in PFF. That's been all we've heard all offseason. And their running back room is stout, bringing in the guy from Oregon State. They've got Mark Fletcher coming off an injury, but had a stellar freshman campaign. Mark Fletcher was somebody that Florida was after as well. We missed out on him. So that running back room really intimidates me. And look, they throw the ball 20 to 30 games. They did it last year with Tyler Van Dyke. And like you said, he's thrown 40 to 60 times sometimes at Washington State. That's a huge drop off in tempo and getting comfortable, getting used to it. So look, I think they're going to run the ball first. I think that's going to be their move. We need to force Cam Ward to throw the football, right? We need to force Mario out of what he's used to. I don't think you just make that automatic switch in 1 year. I know they bring in a new guy. There's going to be a little bit of back and forth. And I think that's also an advantage Florida because there's going to be that chemistry figuring out game time. When your back's against the wall, you go to what you know. And when Mario's back's against the wall and Cristobal's feeling a little froggy, he's going to go to what he knows, which is going to run the ball off, which could be an advantage depending on where the game is. But I think if he starts to panic a little bit, he's not going to go reaching in his bag for some goodies. He's going to just go stick to what he knows. And unfortunately, I think that's sometimes what Billy's problem is that he just sticks to his guns a little too much, and can eat him up. And I think Mario falls in that same category.
Yeah, hey, Dave, we saw Crystal Ball, what he does, one of the things he does well is the offensive front, and they've certainly recruited very well up front. You got Malagoa coming back for a second year. They got a transfer from Indiana at center, Carpenter. Okunlola is going to be in the mix. A couple starters returning as well. So a couple solid players too returning. So I do think that this Miami front is going to be a challenge for a defensive line for the Gators, that we're going to see a lot of turnover. What are your thoughts on that matchup between the Miami offensive line and the Gators defensive line?
Yeah, see that was one of my they say pick a strength, pick a weakness. I had to pick that earlier. A lot of people are thinking, oh, okay, well it's Florida's offensive line. I was like, no, and I'm more worried about Florida's defensive line and getting pressure, according to what they have on their offensive line. We look at their defensive line, they took a lot of transfers, especially in the spring portal period. I don't know how that's going to work out. It's kind of a question mark kind of thing. It could work out for the better, but it's not like they recruited a bunch of Jonathan Grenards either. So I look at it this way. It's like if Florida can't get pressure this game and Miami's just able to just impound, just pound the ball and run the football at them, I think that's what you want to avoid in this game. Now, of course, you hear a lot of things in practice where they've improved the tackling. There's less missed tackles. Of course, it is talking season. You're still going to have to go out there on the football field and prove it. I think they had like 120 some odd plus missed tackles last year. So I know just watching the spring game, I look at fundamentals more than I do like the actual game because I could care less how the game goes. And you look at that spring game, their tackling was a lot better. And I think if Florida, with the linebackers that they brought in from the transfer portal and just some of the talent that they got, your Joey Slackman's on that defensive line. I mean, Cam Jackson's returning. You got Justice Boone back. We don't know how he's going to shape out. TJ Searcy, a guy that was a top 200, top 150 guy who's been in the system for a little bit. You're going to have him out there too. And then you have Grayson Howard. You have Shamar James coming back. I mean, you got a pretty good front right there. And I think that, with the addition of the strength and conditioning that we added to that department, the nutrition, I mean, that was a lot of things that those players were complaining about the last 2 years was like, hey, man, like, look, I don't feel like I'm getting developed here. So it looks like Billy Napier's fixed that, but is it too little too late? And I think that's one of the things that's really big question with me and a lot of other Florida Gator fans is like, could this problem been taken care of earlier? Would we be better? I know Florida's going to be better defensively. I can just feel it. I know it. I heard a lot of things in practice. I've seen some film from like the scrimmages, not really much, but I just feel like deep down, I feel like the defense will be improved. How much improved is the big question. And when it comes to Cam Ward and just the running game with them bringing in Martinez and then Fletcher is coming back. I'm not sure if Fletcher will be 100%. He looks to be uninjured. He's probably 85 to 90 if you were to ask me. But I mean, are they going to rely on that run game really heavy? And what happens if Florida's able to stop their run game? I don't think Cam Ward's beating you with his arm this game. I really don't. He turns over the ball too much. And he takes a long time to get rid of the football. I mean, he has an average time to throw of 2.81. There's been games where he's had an average time to throw for over like 3.1 seconds. I mean, you look at the film and you look at some of the things that he does. He does throw a lot of turnover-worthy plays, but he's also excelled. He's one of your more risk/reward type of quarterbacks. It's like, okay, well, he's going to be your Brett Favre, right? He's going to throw it down the field and chuck it, and if it gets picked, it gets picked. But hey, it's going to go down for a big completion if he can get it down the field. He's been more successful than he has failed at it. And I think that, with the inconsistencies there, you have to rely on a run game. And I think that's what Miami's going to try to do. And I think Florida's defensive line is what's really going to decide this game. If Florida can stop their run, I think Florida wins this game easily. I think their defense has improved. I think Mertz is the better quarterback of the two. Offensive line-wise, he does way better under pressure. Mertz does than Cam Ward under pressure. So I'm not really worried much about the offensive line. I'm more worried about the defensive line in this game.
Yeah. So, Will, if Florida does follow through with the defensive front and can contain that Miami run game, you're looking at putting the pressure on Ward in the passing game. If y'all want to take the time to look up Cam Ward at Washington State versus Oregon State, it's on YouTube for 2023. They have only the plays at quarterback. I thought Ward played incredible in that game. He's accurate passer. I think he's got a big arm, and he can extend plays in a way that makes things difficult for that defense. And you got a couple of receivers at Miami coming back, Restrepo and Jacoby George, that are pretty solid players, along with Samuel Brown coming over from Houston. how is that new secondary going to hold up on the defensive side, Wills? If we could do our job up front with the run game, if the linebackers are solid and the defensive front solid, how do you feel about the new secondary with this matchup?
I feel better about the secondary than I did last year. That's for sure. I think Asa Turner and Castell coming into his true sophomore season make me feel a lot better about what's on the back end. But I think Dave targeted exactly where I think Miami has a major advantage, but I don't actually think it's the run game where you got to be concerned. So here's what you see when you look at Cam Ward on film and when you look at the statistics. When he's not blitzed and he ends up under pressure, he really struggles. So when there's a lot of guys in coverage and you're able to get pressure, that's when he throws those turnover worthy plays. That's when he's scrambling around trying to make something happen, takes a ton of sacks. But all other situations, when he's not blitzed and they keep him clean, or when he's blitzed and they keep him clean, really, even when he's blitzed and they don't. And you can sort of see some statistics when you look at like some timing stuff. So he only scrambled 3 times when he was blitzed last year, got rid of the ball in 2.48 seconds. When he was under pressure, though, he scrambled 17 times, averaged 4.33 seconds per drop back.
Just can't read.
And so, look, the reality is Florida has to get pressure from its front four without having to blitz. So whether they stop the run or not, they're going to have to get pressure. And you think about last year, like I'm still having flashbacks to the KJ Jefferson game against Arkansas, but Jaden Daniels just absolutely destroyed them. And it's probably been 3 or 4 years since Florida has been any good against a running quarterback, at least. You got to kind of go back to maybe like Jonathan Grenard when Florida was pretty good at stopping running quarterbacks and able to hold the edge and those sorts of things. And then you look, we talked about the injury to Lyons a couple of weeks ago. That's big just from a depth perspective. But Euban Milan had 11.5 tackles for loss and 7 sacks. Shamar James had 5.5 tackles for loss. Tyreek Sapp 4.5. Then you got Scooby Williams at 4, Jadon Hill at 4, Bryce Thornton at 3.5, TJ Searcy at 3.5. Like, Searcy and Sapp are the only defensive linemen who show up in that list as I'm listing the guys who had tackles for loss. Jamari Lyons is the next defensive lineman on that list at 2.5. And so Florida's got to figure out how to get some pressure and get some havoc from that front four. And you can't do it with blitzing, because if you do it with blitzing, Ward knows where to go with the ball and he gets rid of it. So that's going to be the trick. And one of the things, and wrote extensively about this in the magazine, Nick, so you know this, is that Ron Roberts was a huge blitzer early in his career before he went to Baylor. Austin Armstrong and Patrick Toney are huge blitzers and have been and have gotten the defense burned. Roberts learned when he went to Baylor to play more 2 deep, learned to play more zone, learned to play more shell. And that kind of translated into Auburn last year. And I'm really curious to see whether they decide, we need to get this guy off of his spot, and we need to bring heavy pressure with linebackers and potentially safeties or corners coming, or whether they trust the fact that they need more guys in coverage and their front four can get pressure. And the problem that Florida had last year in many cases, the secondary couldn't tackle, and they struggled covering it sometimes, but you can't cover anybody for 5 seconds. So if he's averaging 4.5 seconds per drop back when Florida gets pressure, it's going to be like that Jordan Travis game against Florida State a couple of years ago, where every time Florida got pressure, he just sort of ran around the edge and all of a sudden made a play, and it was a first down, and the drive would never end, and those sorts of things. And that's the thing that concerns me the most about Cam Ward, because the reality is Ward hasn't been a great quarterback. Like, he's made great plays. He's made plays that are you look at that and go, oh my God, like what athleticism, look at the cannon, that sort of stuff. And then you look at his QB rating and you go, oh, it's Graham Mertz. And then you look at how much he runs and you're like, well, I mean, I just saw him run for 25 yards, but he averages a yard a rush. So he takes a ton of sacks. He makes bad decisions if you can get pressure with the front four. The big question for me is, and Florida hasn't in probably 3 or 4 years gotten any pressure with the front four. And I don't know where that's going to come from yet. I mean, is it LJ McCray? Is he going to come and wreak havoc off the side? Is Justice Boone fully recovered? Is he going to be able to, bull rush a guy on the outside? Do they have a guy, the kid from Penn? Is he going to all of a sudden get pressure up this Slackman? Is he going to be able to get pressure up the middle and collapse the pocket? But they need somebody who can consistently collapse that pocket without having to bring extra guys. And one that has not been for all we talk about Ron Roberts, Armstrong's still the defensive coordinator. That has not been his MO, right? His MO has been bring them all, and we'll drop Human Milan in coverage. And if they do that, they are getting torched. So, and again, I don't think that's a slight on the secondary. I think that's just where this game will be won is, can they get any sort of penetration on the defensive line? Yeah, for the running game, I think that matters too, because if you get run over, then it makes you bring extra guys up into the box and sort of sets you up to have to do some other things. But to me, it's the passing game. When Ward drops back, do you have 8 guys dropped back? Can you drop 8? If you can, and only bring 3 and still get pressure, or drop 7 and only bring 4 and get pressure, it's a long day for Cam Ward.
Xavier Restrepo, the wide receiver, 95 yards or more in 7 of 12 games last year, 6+ receptions in 9 of 12 games, 25-yard plus receptions, 25 receptions of 25 or plays, I should say. He gained 25 yards or more in at least 8 of 12 games on 1 reception. So cover number 7, please. Jacoby George also 15.2 yards per reception and 8 TDs last year for Miami. So those are your 2 explosive receivers there for the Canes. Hopefully we see them lock up, especially Restrepo. He could be trouble, especially on third downs there. Shelton, let's flip over to the offensive side of the ball. Montrell Johnson, a little bit banged up here in practice. Got to think it makes sense to not rush him back. I know it's Miami, but long season ahead, that seems to be the thought process going around. If Johnson does not go, how are you feeling about the running backs in this offensive line matching up with this tough Miami defensive front? They went heavy on the portal, and they got a couple solid guys up front from recruiting classes last few cycles, including Ruben Bain, who had an excellent freshman season.
I think there's a lot of question marks that, Will brought up on the defense, secondary, things like that. There's one room that I don't question, the development and their preparedness for the game. It's got to be the running back room. I think Trayon Webb was worked in properly last year, just like Trevor Etienne was. Trevor Etienne was worked in a lot more, but we had the Naquan Wright that was supposed to be the guy that really fell off. So Trayon, in a fortunate way, didn't have the same. The guys in front of him were just two studs, so there wasn't much follow up. But they still got Trayon Webb in a lot. I think he's made huge progress in this offseason. And you heard Billy in his press conference, I trust that guy. And what he means by that is to pick up the blitz, right? To give Mertz comfort. And that's something that I keep bringing up because we've heard about the running back room and how fantastic it is, how elusive and electric, and Jaden Ball and Ball and Daniels, Kobe Jackson as well. My concern with those guys is just their experience back in the backfield, right? But I think Trayon Webb is an easy 2 to 3 down back, and Jacoby Jackson Jr. JUCO transfer comes in, brings you experience, and then Daniels and Ball, in my opinion, will give you what ETN did you in burst, right? He would come in and just give you just a quick little explosive 10 to 15-yard run out of nowhere because we all know he wasn't blocking back there either. So I think that's where that running back room lies. I think the offensive line, I know there was a few concerns with the right side of it. There is a lot more depth there, and Austin Barber didn't play fully healthy. I love me some Najee Harris at IMG. Jake Slaughter was a quiet stud at center, top center according to PFF. I think I'm dying on this hill. I'm gonna die here with Damian George moving to right guard. The few times we saw him at right guard last year looked exceptional. And Brandon Crenshaw is a true left tackle with a ton of experience under his belt. When you go look at his PFF scores, he played, or excuse me, right tackle.
Mm-hmm.
When he first came into the league, he played right tackle. I think he had like a 77 PFF rating. Then they transferred him over to left tackle, went down a little bit, learned that position, and then now we're moving back to right tackle. So there may be a little bit of a learning curve. People like it's just a line. Those 2 tackle positions, it's a little bit different when you have to swap. Austin Barber did it as well, moving from right to left. So I think we finally have true tackle positions. Damian George was not a true tackle. So that whole right side, and then we had Mike Mazuka. Obviously, he moves on. There was a weird thing with him that people forget about. Gets injured, wants to leave the team, has to be talked back in. I think that was more of like we can't lose you. But if Billy was in a comfortable place, probably would have let him win. Mindset wasn't there. Didn't want it bad enough. I think that's all gone now. I think that's a big factor. Again, I'm an emotional guy. If you guys haven't seen the show, I ride off emotion, and for me, when I hear about the guys coming in February, coming in July, all 75 strong, practicing on their own, to me, that's what's going to make the difference game one is just the sync, just the unison, the teamwork, the chemistry. That's where I think FSU lacked. right? You bring in so many transfers, you bring in different types of egos. Nobody knows what's going on. And when your back's against the wall and you're in the mud, these aren't really your brothers. And Billy talks about that consistently about building brotherhood, building relationships. And I think that's going to be huge when it comes down to the wire. And we've heard about this logo fever schedule. I imagine a lot of these games are going to come down to the wire and who wants to get dirty with the brothers. And I think that's where we separate, hopefully this year. That's what I'm hearing. Anyways,
great take
I know you
there.
asked about the running back room, but sorry.
No, you covered it all. You covered it all there. Dave, but jumping over to the quarterback here. I know we talked about Ward a bit. Let's talk about Mertz. Like, what do you want to see from Mertz this season? We know he can manage a game. What does he need to do to take the next step forward in your mind?
Well, I think the obvious answer is throw deep, and that's what a lot of people want to see more from Graham Mertz. Unfortunately, when your offensive line doesn't give you enough time to do that, you can't throw it deep. So I think Mertz, I think just give the ball to your playmakers. Like you've already shown that, like you said, you can manage a game, right? You can keep the interceptions down. You can keep the turnovers from happening. You throw for 70% and still be productive. And I think now with, as I said, with the speed that we got at wide receiver, you're going to get a lot of yards after catch, especially if you can get them open in the flat. I think now I would like to see Mertz throw an explosive here or there down the field, maybe 30, 40, 50 yards. But I mean, in reality, how many of those actually, especially if they're 50-50, how many of those are actually successful? I don't know the numbers on that, but, somebody wide open down the field, you can just hit them for 50 yards real quick. Okay, cool. I would like to see him throw the ball deep too, but I don't want him taking so many risks throwing it deep and be so concentrated on that he's turning the ball over. And I think that the concentration on trying to get the football down the field and having more trust in your quarterback and Graham Mertz, I think that is a good thing. I also think that he should be more careful and calculated when he takes those risks. You see a lot of those offensive coordinators come in and say, hey, we're going to chuck the ball all over the field. It's going to be air raid. And they try that, and they're barely getting 200 yards a game, 300 yards a game passing through the air because they're chucking the ball down the field so much to receivers that aren't open and relying on those 50-50 shots or throwing it in double coverage. And I don't want to see him pressured to do that. And I know Billy Napier has said, like, in pressers that, like, he wants him to take calculated deep throws. But I think as the season went on last year, I think he was very productive. And you started seeing his numbers go up in the 10 to 19-yard range. And I think, if you stick in that area, obviously, you get used to quarterback tendencies. And if that defense, those safeties and those linebackers kind of scoot up a little bit to that 10 to 19-yard range, you can take the top off. Yeah, and that's what I want to see. I want to see where Graham Mertz can be productive, kind of slice a defense through the middle of the field, and then when they start to adjust, then take the top off and take those safe deep throws that aren't going to turn into turnovers. So you're first and 10. Say you take a deep shot, you don't make it. Cool. Second and 10, third and 10, you can still get down the field, and I think that he should take some deep shots. But I want to see him be more I can't really say he was really that bad last year, but I would like to see more deep shots from him. But obviously, as I said, be more careful with the football.
What's DJ Lagway's role in this game, Dave? Are we going to see him over or under 9.5 snaps on Saturday?
Ooh. I would say probably under, I think. Maybe. It depends on how the game goes, too. Like, if your offensive line's struggling, it's better to have a running quarterback in there to avoid the pressures, to avoid the, I guess, the big-time sacks. Of course, you worry with a freshman quarterback, hey, is he going to fumble the ball when he gets hit? Is he not going to know this play? Is he going to draw a penalty? I think DJ Lagway does add a different dynamic to the offense now. If your run game is struggling, you bring him in. That gives you a third kind of dimension to run the football. Or, like, I loved what Urban Meyer used to do with Tim Tebow when he'd bring him in for Chris Leak. There was a lot of times where Tebow would run the football, but then there was times where they'd be in the end zone, they would fake a run, drop back, pass to the end zone for a touchdown. And I think he adds that other different dynamic of being like one of those big threat quarterbacks that can take off with the football. But, man, this guy could chuck it 70, 80 yards down the field, too. And if somebody's wide open, that's an easy throw for any quarterback, right? Mm-hmm. You could be a freshman, a sophomore, junior. Yeah, you just have to be accurate with the throw. And I think with DJ Lagway coming into this system, adding that different dynamic, I think it can only get better and not worse if he's not turning over the football and if he's not drawing freshman dumb mistake penalties.
Shelton, where are you on that? Over or under 9.5 snaps for Lagway?
Yeah, I got to go over 9 because from what I've been preaching, I believe how it should go is similar to that Chris Leak Tebow era where he's programmed in for certain plays, whether it's 3rd and 2 and under, DJ's coming in and we're going to run a triple option and it's unstoppable. right? I don't care what you throw at it. Just because the game gets flowing, flowing, flowing in the 3rd and 2, everybody knows DJ and this group's coming in, and that it doesn't really matter where we are on the football field. Maybe once we get past the 50, right? Again, I think that's how it should be, just to get him in the game. And I think getting him in the game will ignite the crowd for sure. It's a huge advantage point. And to see your 5-star prized quarterback get in and bust one for 2 yards or throw a jump pass for a tutty would rally up the troops more than you could ever ask for. So it's got to be over 9. I really think that it does.
Are we going? Go ahead, Dave.
I was going to say, I just also want to add that, like, if Graham Mertz is on fire and he's not making any mistakes and he's just chucking it down the field, you keep him in. You don't put Lagway in. You let him go to town.
Well, Will, are we ever going to see the League Tebow again? I'm ready to hire Shelton as offensive coordinator with that idea. I would love to see the League Tebow type scenario with Lagway.
I mean, I don't know. After all the stuff we've heard about team chemistry and that sort of stuff, it feels like, you put Lagway in there, you might disrupt that. So, I'm not sure that you want to give him an opportunity and have Mertz getting booed when he's coming off the field if Lagway happens to be succeeding. I'd be really surprised if we see him more than 9 snaps in the game against Miami. Like, I mean, you've had all offseason to prepare. You should have all sorts of answers to the types of stuff that Miami's going to be bringing. You've got Samford the week after, so it's not like you're like, really prepping for somebody hard the week after. This is the place where you say, look, if I got something in the tank, I need to empty it out. And I know that the response then immediately is, well, Lagway. And I'm like, but he's not really like, he's the guy on the goal line where you need somebody to be able to run a read option and the quarterback is able to hold on to it, not necessarily the guy that you're going to put in and trust to check it 50 yards downfield in a big spot. Because if the guy doesn't come open, is he going to, or if a safety stays deep, is he going to throw it into double coverage because he doesn't necessarily, because he's only getting a couple of plays anyway. To me, this is like, they've made it very clear. This is Graham Mertz's job. This is Graham Mertz's team, and that it's going to be Lagway's team next year. Now they need to get Lagway ready to play, which means I think you're going to see him play like 3 quarters against Samford the week after. But in this one, I mean, unless it's going just haywire and, or obviously if Mertz were to get injured, I don't think you get over those 9 snaps at all.
No, we say Mertz stays healthy, but I'm with Shelton on this though. I take the over. I'm taking the over on that. I'd like to see him worked in some short yardage situations. I definitely think there's a role for that. There's just enough of a difference in the skill set that I think there is absolutely a role for him in some scenarios, especially if you're missing your top running back on the day too. Brings a different element to the game there. So Will, let's talk about that Miami secondary going up against this Florida passing game. We obviously were talking about Mertz pushing down the ball downfield. Got a couple new faces in Badger and DK, and also you have Boardingham and Hanson back for another year. Boardingham's more your guy in the passing game at the tight end spot. How are we feeling matching up against this virtually brand new Miami secondary?
Well, I mean, Miami's defense is almost completely brand new. They got Simeon Barrow coming in from Michigan State on the defensive line. They got Deani Hill, cornerback, coming in from Marshall. They got Elijah Alston, the edge rusher, coming in from Marshall. Isaiah Taylor, the safety from Arizona. And then you got CJ Clark, the nose tackle from NC State. So they got, there are 6 guys that are projected to be starters for the Hurricanes who are coming in from the transfer portal. So do I think Florida has an opportunity to exploit maybe a lack of communication, a lack of cohesion? Absolutely. And I think that's where Shamir DK having that having the chemistry with Mertz, where you're not talking about him needing to gain chemistry. He should already have chemistry with Trey Wilson, which means the guy you're really talking about needing to build chemistry with is Elijah Badger. And if you got those 3 guys in there at wide receiver against an inexperienced or at least maybe non-cohesive secondary might be the right word. But I mean, look at that. I mean, I listed a cornerback, a safety, and a nickelback. Michael Powell, the safety from Washington, I think I forgot him, nickelback. So in their nickel defense, 3 of the defensive backs are going to be brand new starters. Florida's sort of in the same situation. I mean, we think about bringing in a guy like Asa Turner, and then Devin Moore is going to be at the other corner opposite Jason Marshall. So there's a lot of turnover with every team, but that's a lot of guys to bring in and have to incorporate in a relatively short amount of time. Well, and so, double moves, those sorts of things, I think are things you should probably look for, especially early on.
Might be a positive for them too. They missed quite a bit of tackles last season as well.
Well, yeah, you had me look this up before the show, and the missed tackle rate for Miami is not great. It was something like 109 out of like 500 tackles, but Florida's missed tackle rate was even worse. It was like 116 out of 450 tackles. So, and honestly, it's funny because Shelton, you were talking about like how could anyone see a statistical advantage for either of these? I look at the stats from last year. Miami had a better offense overall when you look at it on a yards per play basis, and they had a massively better defense when you look at yards per play. Now that part of that's because Florida was so bad, but Florida was 117th overall in yards per attempt allowed on the run against the run. Miami, and they gave up 5.1 yards per rush. Miami gave up 5.1 yards per play. So if you added the rushing and passing yardage together, averages together, Miami was as bad as Florida's rush defense. And so, when Dave's talking about Florida's ability to stop the run up front, when I'm talking about their ability to get pressure from their front four, like those are the things we're looking at going, where did that get fixed? Right? You start talking about the safeties. That's all great. I think they're gonna be better. But where did that get fixed? Because there was a huge separation last year. These two teams, I mean, when you look at their scoring differential, they truly were 2 wins apart, right? I mean, you can make some arguments about maybe Florida should have beat Missouri or Florida should have beaten Arkansas, but you could definitely make an argument that Miami should have beaten Georgia Tech.
Yeah,
and so Miami also, but they had 2 wins in overtime. They went to overtime with Clemson and Virginia last year too, so they squeaked out a couple wins too.
But again, I mean, I think when you look at scoring differential, Miami was 2 wins better than Florida last year. It's pretty clear when you start looking at those overall stats. So that's the question I have, and I think the question that Gator fans need to ask is, when you talk about a guy like DK, when you talk about a guy like Badger, when you talk about guys like Boardingham taking steps up, and when you talk about Montreal Johnson maybe not being in, what does that do to the overall team? Has Florida gotten 2 games better this offseason, and has Miami sort of stayed stagnant? If Miami's gotten better, then Florida has to get better than that. And that I think is why Miami's a 2.5 point favorite, is people are looking at it going, Florida has so far to come that, there's room that just improvement isn't going to be good enough, because these weren't equivalent teams last year. Miami was significantly better.
Well, a lot of changes on both rosters. So it's almost new teams here coming in. I mean, in a lot of ways, there's not a lot of returners on either side, it seems like. So it's going to be quite different than last year, hopefully. But hopefully for the positive for the Gators. But I know Miami's coming in hoping the same thing here, Shelton. I think this is an awesome way to open the season. I love seeing us play Miami. I can't stand their fans do a lot of talking. We do a lot of talking on our side too, but I love this start to a season versus an FCS team or a directional school. Start the season at Miami, end the season with Florida State. I don't care about the expanded SEC schedule. I think that's a great way to do it. I would love to see this Miami rivalry come back. Where are you on that?
I love it. I don't mind it every couple of years. I think it makes it a little more special. I think we're like Florida fans are a little frustrated about it. I think with the 12-team playoff, it makes it okay to have a harder schedule because you can lose a few and still get in.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, again, I have my Hightop Oregon channel. I joke them because they play Idaho Tech Saturday. Imagine you wait 7 months to play Idaho Tech. You know what I mean? Like we get Miami, and I'm kind of bummed we're playing Sanford. This is a waste of a week. Just get rid of that game. Plug somebody else in. Let's just bring on Oklahoma. I don't care at this point. Let's ride. I want to wake up every single Saturday, be fired up, watch football. And look, don't get it twisted. I'm still be fired, watch Sanford. But I enjoy going up against every big school out there. I think it makes it great, just like what makes NFL fun. It's just everyone's equivalently equal for the most part. You have your ups and downs and your bottom feeders of the conferences and whatnot. But I don't know. I love a good conference matchup and out of conference matchup. I think it makes it great. And to your point, Will, look, the 2.5 points going back to last year, I think you kind of went on that, Nick, a little bit too. Some of those things, I agree that those things did happen last year. What I was looking at is where we're at right now. Talent-wise, composite, what is to come back. And I believe how my brain works, plus and minus, the issues that were there were addressed. Now that has to be fixed, right? But there was also issues on Miami's side that you imagine were fixed too. And I think if we cross those out, that's where my head's at. I forget about what happened last year. I just close that brain off. You know what I mean? My mindset is they're college kids, right? For the same thing of like, look, I know we struggled at it, but it's just like the lightning in a bottle. One year you look like crap, the next year a completely revamped team. It's like, how does that happen? It's just the ebbs and flows. It could just take one person telling you a different way. And this is where my head's at. I always say 12-0. And it's not really me joking. It is in a sense, but it's just the mentality of that's why I love college football. It's just why Georgia Tech can march into Dublin and take down a top 10 team in the country. Like Florida State last year was supposed to dominate every single way, and they come in game one and get blasted. So it changes so much from year to year. That's why I don't put too much weight from what happened in the year prior into my analysis on that.
Yeah, it's that's a great way to look at it, Shelton. I'm looking forward to this Saturday here, Dave. That being said, let's start the predictions here, Dave. We got Miami at +2.5. How you feeling about the game? How do you see it going? And give us your winner. Or I'll say this: if you guys are doing this on your show, feel free to hold your picks. But if you're ready to go, let's have it.
It's up to Shelton, man. I'll let him make the decision.
No, we're good. We're good.
Yeah, we're good to go. I think Florida has the advantage at quarterback. And I know a lot of people like Cam Ward, and he's throwing for a lot of yards, but he's going to be in a new system with new players around him. He's going to have to learn a lot in that system. If you go back and you look at his statistics from, Washington State, he was decent. He averaged 6.4 yards per attempt, but his second year was 7.7. He had more familiarity with a lot of the guys around him. And if you look at Incarnate Ward, same thing, averaged 7.1, went up to 7.9 his second year. I think, I'm not going to say Cam Ward takes a step back necessarily at Miami, but I think that it's going to be a learning curve for him. And being very turnover prone worthy as well doesn't really set that well with me. And I think at the end of the day, I think having the advantage of quarterback, like as a team, if it's a decent advantage, I think that ultimately is the all or kill or all or be all. But I think Florida goes in there, and honestly, I've looked at a lot of film from Miami. I've looked at a lot of film from Florida. I just think Florida comes in here and they win at least by 2 touchdowns. I mean, like you can sit there, you could call me an idiot, you can call me stupid. Maybe we don't win by 2 touchdowns and we get blown out the door, but I can't see a scenario where Florida just goes in there for the second year in a row in game one and just comes out there completely flat. I just can't see that, especially with an experienced quarterback with Mertz, and you got the familiarity with DK, Eugene Wilson, Badger. Obviously, there's I guess a non-familiar part of that, but it's a very experienced wide receiver. You got in guys that have been in the system for a couple of years that haven't yet touched the college football field. I just think that with all the weapons Graham Mertz has, if the offensive line just plays decent, it just plays average. They don't have to play great. Just play average. I think Florida can win this game. A couple touchdowns.
2 touchdowns.
Yeah, I think it's a 2-touchdown win. I can't really predict the score, but I'll just say I think it's about a 2-touchdown win.
That's good. That gives the spread. And I'm not gonna ask either one of you guys the overall record because you guys are on record with 12-0. So we know what you guys think.
15-0.
I wouldn't want to disappoint anybody with a different prediction, so we'll just stick with that. Shelton, how you feeling about this? Will and I are going to do our picks. We got a bunch of picks we're doing at the end, so we're going to film that separately here. So how you feeling about this one?
I mean, come on. Look, I've learned to, because I refuse. I can't. Like if you ask me to sit down and do a schedule or a pick, I know a lot of guys do it and they'll pit 8-4, 7-5. I feel like if I did that now, the brand would be tarnished. I can't do it in me, and it doesn't feel right to do it. It's like a fighter mentality. Why would you show up thinking you're going to lose that game? I refuse to do it. So I give percentages. I feel like it's a better way of kind of telling you how I feel about that game. And I'm 80-20, 70-30 Florida winning that game. So it's very confident. Again, can we get Georgia, Texas? Those percentages change. I'm not going to give Georgia or Texas the edge, but that will kind of at least let me like, hey, I respect these teams. I know where it's at, but my confidence is extremely high. And again, it's not even a disrespect towards Miami. I think they've got a good football team. I think they're going to come in and do well. But 35 straight games at home for game one in the swamp. I think there's the same reason why we beat Utah year one. I don't think that team had any right beating Utah, but stars align when you're playing in the swamp. It gets rowdy. And I believe this team headed into the swamp is better than that prior team with Anthony Richardson. And I think this Miami team is not as good as what that Utah team was either. So that's kind of where my head's at. They get to wake up Saturday morning, just like every Saturday morning, and take the same trip they always do. They've been doing for the last 6-7 months.
Well, as the high top guys like to say, we ain't losing.
We
ain't losing, boys.
Hey, I do have a question here regarding high tops. I know how Dave got involved a couple of years ago now, right? You guys starting your is this second or third season here together?
second season.
Second season. So where how did it start, Shelton? Tell me about the flying pig logo. I think that's a great logo.
Yeah. It started, I think we just had our 3 or 4 year anniversary. I think 3 year anniversary. Yeah, because we started at the year of the Winter Olympics or the Summer Olympics when it was in 2021. I do remember that, I think. And it was BDE. It was called Big Dick Energy. And what made me change it was I got into connections with Florida Victorious, and I was like, I don't know if I should be sending Jen BDE as, as as who she's partnering with for this. And at the time I loved it. I was like, this is sweet. This is how we are. We're just gonna have fun and do what we want. And then it kind of switched. So I wanted, like, look, I loved Barstool. I think that was a great name. And I was like, how do we get it there? So Hightop Sports kind of was originated from that. A buddy of mine came up with that. And then pigs flying, it just doesn't make sense. And that's what we don't make sense. That was kind of where that came from. You know what I mean? Like how do pigs fly? Like, how do these two dumbasses run a podcast? Pardon my French. And that was kind of where it stemmed from. It's weird, and we're weird and wild and like to have fun.
So Dave, how'd you get involved? Because you had your own podcast before you went over.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny because I was on YouTube one night and I was just like streaming through different Florida Gator shows and channels, just listening to anything, and I came across Shelton's channel. I don't know how I got there, but I started watching it and I was just like, oh my God, this guy is severely entertaining. Like, this guy is hilarious. And I just kept watching episode after episode after episode. And I've always wanted somebody to like co-host with or talk with, but I've always done my podcast about myself because I would get comfortable. But I was just like, man, if I could just join somebody on like a show, and somebody that has kind of the same silly personality that I do, but at the same time takes like talking about Florida somewhat to a serious level, then that's probably my guy I would want as a co-host. And I looked at Shelton's show and I was like, dude, this guy's perfect. He's hilarious. I can get along with him. He's entertaining. I said, I'm just going to reach out to him and see if he needs a co-host or if he wants somebody else on the show. And if not, maybe I can help his show out in some sort of way. And luckily, we just started talking. We kind of collabed a little bit. And then ever since then, it's just taken off. And now we're at like 21,000, almost 21.5 thousand subscribers. And, every time I go to Gainesville, it's like, hey, look, it's Hightop Dave. He's just reporting the news. It's pretty cool. I will say it's one hell of a ride. And I'm very humble and appreciative that I get to do that show with Shelton. And on top of that, I just interviewed the Pouncey brothers yesterday. So it's been one heck of a ride, and I don't think it's going to stop. So I'm here with the seatbelt on. I'm strapped in on the roller coaster. Let's ride.
Well, is there anything, first off, wildly entertaining is a good way to describe your guys' show. It's a good listen every week, but you guys also dive in, and you guys have some great coverage on the team as well. So Hightop Sports, I'm sure everybody here has already checked them out at some point, so be sure to check them out. Is there anything that you guys want to promote? Start with Dave on that and kick it over to Shelton after.
I'm going to go ahead. Obviously, Shelton, I know you're going to at least promote the show. So I'm going to go ahead and I will skip that part. I'll let you do that because I know you're good at that stuff. But I honestly, I'll just, you can find me. You can follow me on Twitter at Hightop Dave. I also want to give a shout out to, as I said, the Pouncey twins. Their Twin P whiskey. You can pick it up at jfhaydens.com. You can pick it up at there's some other sites you can buy it from, but they prefer you buy it from the brand site. So I've been listing that link out there. So if anybody, wants to, have a bottle of whiskey from the Pouncey brothers or just try it out, hit me up in the DM. I can send you the link. And I will say that whiskey is pretty damn smooth. I'm not going to lie, because I looked at it and I said, okay, cool. $50 price point for 750 milliliters. It better be quality. It was more than that to me. Like, I could drink that thing, like I could drink it like it was water. I was taking shots and I didn't get no bitter beer face or anything like that after taking the shot. So it is pretty smooth. So if you guys want a really nice quality, high quality, smooth whiskey, pick you up some Twin P. It actually is pretty good.
Good way to support the Pounceys there. Shelton.
Yeah. Hightop Sports, we go live every Wednesday at 8:35. This season's going to be jam-packed. We're going to have shows on Saturday, 9:30, our Hightop Game Day show. Would love to have you guys on if you're able to represent Florida. Allie Peak, she loves that spot, so it's going to be tough to claw that away from her. She loves. It's a good time. We got multiple creators that come on that show. That show right now is kind of my baby. I really enjoy it. I have a good time with it. It's kind of getting our feet into the world of college football a little bit. It's not just Florida focus. So for me, it's challenging. It's different. It's a new world, and that fires me up. So, and I appreciate you guys coming on here, allowing us to talk with you guys. I think you guys do a phenomenal job. I got your magazine framed up in here. I love that you guys are killers, and it's an honor and a pleasure to be on your guys' show. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
Well,
definitely.
high top guys, we anytime you want us on, we'll be there, and anytime we'd love to have you back as well. So check out Hightop Sports on YouTube. They're all over the place. Anywhere you subscribe to podcasts, be sure to check these guys out. Shelton and Dave, thanks for joining the show. Will and I are going to make picks after this.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
boys. Go Gators.
Go Gators.
Well, we appreciate the high top guys joining us, but we wanted to do a separate segment here at the end. We're going to do our picks for week 1. We're going to track my picks versus Will's picks this season. We're just going to do the spreads. I'm going to pick 5 games a week, including the Gator game. And I guess for the bye week, we'll pick another one. But when Florida's playing, they're going to be one of those 5, obviously. And we'll end with the Florida game, but we'll kick off here at noon on Saturday. Georgia versus Clemson. The Bulldogs are 13.5-point favorites in Atlanta. Will, man, Kirby Smart, for a guy that doesn't like to play neutral site games, he sure likes to play in Atlanta quite a bit to open the season. I know it's not technically neutral, but I don't think Jacksonville's a million miles away either for him. But the Bulldogs are 13.5-point underdogs. And Will, I'm not expecting Clemson to be super competitive in this game, but if Clemson can hang around in this game and even pull an upset, man, would that change the narrative on Dabo Swinney so quickly? That being said, I don't think Clemson has near enough juice on offense to stick around in this one. I think this is not going to be pretty. I like Georgia to cover that 13.5 pretty easily.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Georgia already broke Florida State. They might as well break the other team that's in the ACC that everybody thinks is pretty good. Carson Beck's coming back. He was pretty good last year. I suspect he plays even better this year than he did last year. Obviously, the Clemson game is a big opener, so you don't have that warm up. But I don't think you need to when you got a quarterback who's playing at an elite level. And I think Beck is at least going to come close to approximating that. I would be surprised if Georgia doesn't cover in the first half. I think this one's 28-35. Like, this one's one where you walk away and go, oh, shit. About what Georgia's
flipping the
got
station in the third quarter, trying to find something else to entertain you, probably type of game.
I mean, it is a home game and it is early, so maybe some of the guys will have been out late racing the night before, and there will be an opportunity there for Clemson to get out quickly. But look, Georgia was one of the best 4 teams in the country last year, and because of Alabama was able to keep them out of the playoff, I suspect that has been drilled into their head all year, that you can't slip up, that you can't ease off the gas. And if they had a new quarterback they were breaking in, maybe you pick him, or maybe you pick somebody else. But, are we really talking about Klubnik coming in there and taking some giant leap to make Clemson that much better?
Boy, top to bottom.
I'll take Georgia in the points, man.
Georgia in the points. We both have Georgia at minus 13.5. Notre Dame goes down to College Station. College game day is going to be down there. Texas A&M is a 2.5-point favorite. Who you got?
So I have Notre Dame because Texas A&M just changed coaches, and the fact that they're a favorite really flummoxes me a little bit. I mean, I guess it's, they have a ton of talent, and Notre Dame has to go to Texas. Notre Dame really never goes to any difficult road games for the most part, except for USC. At the same time, I look at it and I go, Notre Dame's been a solid team the last few years, and A&M has not. And whenever you go through these coaching changes, I mean, we saw it with Saban when he took over Alabama. We saw it with Smart when he took over for Mark Richt. Richt had a 10-win team or a 9-win team, and then that team went back to, I think it was 8-5 or 7-6 in that first year under Smart. There's always growing pains. There's always guys going out, guys coming in. And those Georgia teams with Richt had plenty of talent to be better than a 7-6 or 8-5 team. And Smart obviously has proven that he can win a ton of games, but those sorts of transitions just tend to be clunky. And I don't think that's I don't think that's going to be any different this time. And you play a big time team the first game of the year in a brand new era. Obviously, Billy Napier was able to get the job done against Utah a couple years ago. But I'm not expecting A&M to get the job done against Notre Dame. I got the Irish, and I'll lay the points? I don't know. I'm not a gambler.
Irish are 2.5 point.
I'll take Notre Dame to win, right? I think Notre Dame's actually going to win that game. I don't think they're just going to cover.
You're going to cover, yeah.
Yeah, but we'll. But they will. I'm going to definitely pick them to cover.
Yeah, Notre Dame. I got Notre Dame too, covering 2.5. I thought they were a quietly good team last year. I don't think they made a ton of noise on the national scene, but I do think this is a chance for them to make a statement against an SEC school right off the bat. Even though Elko has just turned things around, you got Riley Leonard, the quarterback, coming in from Duke as a transfer. He was a very solid player for Elko at Duke, so Elko will know how to scheme up against his old quarterback. I'm assuming that might be an interesting advantage for Texas A&M. But in Texas A&M, they've lost a lot of players, but they had such deep classes. There's still plenty of talent on those rosters, and certainly more talent than Duke. So I think Elko is going to be very interesting to watch. I would love nothing more than to be basking in a glow of a Florida victory after the 3:30 game. Sit down at 8 and get a first look at our Week 3 opponent in A&M. But I do think the Irish get the job done. I think it'll be an interesting one. I think it's going to be close, but I like give me the Irish in the points plus 2.5. Well, let's skip to Sunday night here. USC and LSU are playing in Vegas. You got Lincoln Riley, USC making some noise on the recruiting trail, and then losing a lot of guys on the recruiting trail. So they're at least trying to make some changes. Big change they made in the offseason, though. Defense coordinators out. They brought in the guy from UCLA who had a great season with the Bruins, turned them around on defense last year. So we'll see if that helps. We also know that LSU struggled quite a bit on defense. I think there's been a lot of chatter. LSU's a 4.5-point favorite here. There's been a lot of chatter about LSU taking that step forward and really improving on defense. I haven't heard much about USC in that game a little bit. My gut tells me to stick with the SEC, but I think USC could come out and put some points up on the board early. And if they do that, I think LSU, I don't totally trust this LSU defense yet. I know they brought in Blake Baker to turn things around. Don't totally trust that defense. And if anyone can expose that, I think going up against Lincoln Riley in game one's a tough matchup for LSU. And even though I think they'll have the advantage up front, I think USC can score a little bit and they'll cover that 4.5.
So I have SC making the playoff this year. Miller Moss, who's the redshirt junior quarterback, and just lit up everybody that he played last year. QB rating of 191.2, played awesome in the bowl game. And he just beat out Jaden Maeva, the transfer from UNLV. So UNLV was the coach there was sort of a hot name for Gator fans who were sort of looking, going, ooh, this is kind of an innovative offense. If Billy Napier decides to bring in an offensive coordinator, could he bring in the guy from UNLV? He didn't do that, but the quarterback decided to transfer to USC. And the thought process was Caleb Williams going out. You got the Maeva coming in, and Maeva's going to win this job. Well, Miller Moss beat him out. And I think what we've seen on the field from Miller Moss, and you see this quickly. I wrote an article years ago, probably like 2017, 2018 now, about what you can tell about the first 3 games of a guy's career when he's out there. And it turns out that what you see most of the time is what you're going to get. He's completed 70.8% of his passes, 46 to 65, 10.5 yards an attempt, 7 touchdowns, 1 interception, and he's going up against the Nussmeier. And that's just the reality, man. You're making me pick a Nussmeier instead of Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels playing for the Washington Football Club at this point. And the only reason LSU was 10-3 last year instead of 5-7 right there with Florida was because of Jaden Daniels. And so if that offense takes any kind of step back, I think they're going to struggle. And again, this is one of those, it's in Vegas, right? So it's not like you've got this. I mean, LSU is not a home team. This is a neutral site game. LSU 4.5-point favorites. I'm picking SC to cover. I'm picking SC to win outright. And honestly, I'm picking SC to probably win the Big Ten or at least come up against Ohio State as one of the top 2 teams in the conference.
Ooh, no love for Oregon, huh?
No, I think they'll destroy Oregon.
Wow. All right. Big time pick with USC there. LSU, if they lose this game, I believe this. I'm double checking right now because I'm blanking on 2021 for a sec. One second. Let me double check this so I know I got it right. But LSU, if they lost to UCLA, the first game in 21. That was was that the game Ogeron was yelling at the guy? Was Ogeron was yelling at the guy walking in?
Which Ogeron was yelling at somebody? It was every game.
No, when he's walking to the stadium.
Our friends out there yelling at people. What a shock.
Yeah, he's yelling about the guy's blue shirt. Anyway, it's a funny clip online. But LSU, if they lose this game, it's going to be the 5th opening loss in a row for LSU. Is that insane? They lost at Mississippi State, Mike Leach, UCLA on the road, and then they've lost to Florida State the last 2 years. This would be the fifth loss in a row to open the season for LSU, which is unheard of. All right, Monday night, I believe this game is Boston College goes into Tallahassee. FSU is 17.5-point favorite. Ooh, that looks attractive for Boston College. Well, I know that FSU is certainly a better football team. I expect them to win this game. But after watching that offense, and it seemed like DJU just struggled to go downfield. Now, credit to Georgia Tech. Super physical performance. I thought they played very good, and that they should get credit for that game. But FSU putting the ball down the field, 17 and a half. I think I'd like to go with Boston College with that kind of point spread.
Yeah, so I'm going to take Florida State. I think the Noles are going to be angry coming out after that Georgia Tech game. I think they took Georgia Tech a little bit lightly, and I think they got burned by doing it. Obviously, it's going to be at home, so you'll have that advantage as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then Boston College isn't very good. In fact, their head coach, Jeff Hafley, left to be the defensive coordinator of the Green Bay Packers. So not even a lateral move. It was a backward move for a guy who's a head coach at a power, not a Power 5 school, but Power 4 school.
They hired Billy O'Brien.
But you got Bill O'Brien coming in. So, he is the guy who can stabilize a program when a coach leaves in ignominy. And so maybe, I've experienced that up in here in the Pennsylvania area, obviously, since he spent 2 years at Penn State and then ran to be the head coach of the Texans. I think, again, I go back to there's transitions in coaches cause problems, and they cause problems in year one. So Boston College wasn't very good last year, 7-6 overall. And now they're transitioning head coaches. And I just say, what do I look at from a Boston College team and go, they're going to do this well? Hafley could keep it close from a defensive perspective. He was a pretty good defensive coach. Is he going to be able to? Is Bill O'Brien going to be able to maintain that while also building up the offense? I don't think Boston College has the athletes to stick with it. And the other thing, and this is something I think we should keep in mind, is Georgia Tech is 6-3 in their last 9 games, and 2 of those losses are to Clemson and to Georgia. Yeah. So there's a possibility that Georgia Tech is not just sort of the little brother to Georgia who's going to get whipped and go 6-6 every year. This might be a team that's 8-5, 8-4, 9-3, maybe even, I don't think 10-2. I'm probably going a little bit far there, but this could be a team that is playing a significant role in the ACC. I don't think Boston College is at all. So I'm going to take Florida State minus 17.5. They'll probably win by 17 and screw me on it, but whatever.
All right. Now for the big game, we got Miami coming into the Swamp. We got our picks from the Hightop guys. Miami's a 2.5-point favorite here. Will, how you feeling about the Canes coming into the Swamp?
I mean, we sort of we spent a lot of time previewing this, obviously, and throughout the week, I'm going to do something a little bit different this year for the games. I'm going to sort of have an overall statistical breakdown that drops on Monday, then a quarterback analysis on Tuesday, then a key matchup on Wednesday, and then the prediction is going to drop on Thursday. So I'm not going to give you a prediction here, but on Thursday you'll be able to grab that number. But the thing that I look at is when you look at the offensive line for Miami, Jalen Rivers, 128th best recruit in the country, playing left tackle. Samson Okalola, a 5-star, 23rd best country in the country at left guard. Francis Mayoga, number 10 ranked guy in the country there at right tackle. So Zach Carpenter, the transfer in from Indiana, was 547th ranked, but again, they think he's pretty good bringing him in. Inez Cooper at right guard, 1149. So you think about it, center and right guard is probably where you need to attack them. And I look at Justice Boone, Joey Slackman, Tyreek Sapp, and TJ Searcy as that front four for Florida. And to me, that's the question is, do I think those 4 guys are going to be able to beat the 5 guys that Miami has up front? And I have some concerns about that. And that I think is where this game is going to be decided. Because I think Florida's defense is going to struggle if they're not able to get pressure on Cam Ward with the front 4.
I definitely think that is before the game, before anything's proven, I definitely think that is edge Miami in that matchup specifically. But I do think there is a big deal. It's a big deal that they're coming in for their first game here in the Swamp. I think Cam Ward, your quarterback leading your offense for the first time. We saw Graham Mertz go on the road to Utah last year, and it was just discombobulated at times. I think you're going to have a few of those mistakes from the Canes. I do. I love the addition of Ward. I love the addition of Martinez. I think they're doing a lot of good things down at Miami in terms of recruiting. I think this is a much better football team than it was a few years ago. But I think Florida's made improvements as well. And I do think that Florida having really a roster that's been together a little bit longer across the board than Miami, I think that is going to make a difference here in game one. I think Shelton said this early in the show, like, I think Miami's going to be the type of team that gets better as you go throughout the season. Hopefully, we're that type of team too. But I think Miami, I think this game is a little bit bigger for Florida too, in the sense that Miami's got plenty of opportunity to recover. If you go look at Miami's schedule, I think their next toughest game is FSU and then maybe Virginia Tech. I think are your next two toughest ones there. So I don't think they have Clemson on the schedule this year. I don't think Clemson's on the docket. So Miami's going to have chances to recover. This is not quite as do or die as it is in Florida here. So I'm going to go with the Gators. You give me the Gators and the points here with plus 2.5. So I'll take the Gators to cover against the Canes on Saturday. Well, week one of college football is just around the corner. That's our first 5 picks to open the season. We'll track our records and we'll stand up against our records each week here before we give these picks. And hopefully we'll all learn something from this throughout the year. But can't wait for college football to return. Any final words before we head into the season?
Yeah, just a reminder, a couple days left. If you'd like to support us, go over to readingreaction.com/mag. You can pick up the magazine. Obviously, we'll have those 4 articles that I mentioned up this week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We'll have a preview or a preview. We'll have a recap that's up on Sunday morning. And then, on our Patreon channel, we've been known to do Saturday night recaps as well. So if you want to join us over there, you can go to patreon.com/readingreaction for a couple of bucks. You can join over there and then listen to what we think after a game. So, we got a lot of stuff going on this season. Excited to get going, but certainly there's still time if you want to grab the magazine over on Amazon, or you can grab it as a digital copy and sort of read about what's going into the season. Like I said, I think there's some optimistic reasons to believe that Napier's going to be able to turn this around. We tried to highlight those, but there are also obviously areas for concern. And so there you go, Florida versus the world. Honestly, I think the argument that makes the most sense to me for Florida is that these guys have heard that they suck for the last 6 months and last 8 months, really, since the season ended in December, and that they decided to commit themselves to not allow that to ever be said about them again. Right. And the cultural stuff. And I make fun of that because at elite levels of college football, I think that's overrated, but I don't think Miami is an elite team and I don't think Florida is an elite team. And so does that matter in the edges? Maybe. And does it matter when the swamp gets really, really loud and you got to make a play? Absolutely. And so, that's going to be the question is, all that talk at some point has to translate into the play on the field. And for Florida thus far in the Napier era, it has not. And so the question is, can it, right? Is all the culture talk, he's got his players now. You have a piece of the magazine talking about the percentage of players who are Billy Napier's. Are those guys going to be able to step up? Is that culture stuff just going to be talk? Or is that culture stuff going to be what drives this team forward? And look, I'm hopeful. I mean, I'm rooting for him. I hope that he does. But, look, I picked Florida over Utah last year for a lot of reasons. And I felt really stupid after that Utah game. And then we just saw the same gunshots into the foot all season long that happened in Utah. So I think the good news is that if Florida comes out and absolutely whips Miami, then that's probably a preview of what we're getting the rest of the year. I don't think we're going to see a whole bunch of up and down, right? I don't think it's going to be, one game they're really good and one game they're really bad, like we did with Anthony Richardson a couple of years ago. I think the downside to Graham Mertz may be that you put down the accelerator and there's only so fast you can go. But the upside to Graham Mertz is no one's slamming on the brakes and he's not trying to, put on the emergency brakes and go flying around a corner. He's going to do slow, methodical, what he needs to do to keep this team level. And if the overall level of the team has risen, then this team has a chance to be really, really successful. Obviously, though, you get a couple of bad calls, a couple of bad plays, get burned deep a few times, and all of a sudden that culture stuff goes right out the window. And that'll sort of be the question: is can they establish who they are in this one game against Miami? And you mentioned it's critical, right? I mean, this is one where if Florida doesn't get this one, there are probably 5 or 6 teams on the schedule who are better than Miami. And, the schedule's interesting from the standpoint of Florida State, probably not as good as people thought they were going to be. I think LSU not going to be as good as people thought they were going to be coming into the year. We'll see how that works out when they play USC this weekend. But I think teams like Tennessee, teams like Kentucky, probably better than some folks thought they were going to be to start the season when we really start looking at those teams. And so I suspect that at the end of the day, we're still going to look back at Florida's schedule and go, whew, that was tough. And then it'll just be a question of, did Florida survive the grind or did Florida fade? And the hope is that all that culture stuff, all the brotherhood, all the building into Napier's guys ends up being a team that powers through it rather than one that fades. And hey, I'm excited to see it, man. We're going to be able to cover it all year.
I can live with the result if Miami comes in here and outplays us. I can't. I'm not going to be happy if we're beating ourselves like we did last year. We beat ourselves.
We have the special teams mat, buddy. We got the special teams mat, so we're gonna be good
with 10 spots on it. With 10 spots on it, like
the kicker is assumed.
You would assume. What happens when you assume? Well, what happens when you assume?
You pick Utah. You pick Florida to beat Utah last year. That's what happens when you assume.
Well, I'll tell you this. I feel better about this game than I did against the game with Utah last year. So I think
that's so funny. I feel worse. Like I just
Utah is a proven commodity. Miami is, like, you could talk about the recruiting, a bunch of other stuff. Miami has not proven it on the field. They've been as up and down as we have in some respects. And these are two 500 teams the last few years that are trying to take that next step. That's why it's a very interesting matchup. And
Utah had no Cam Rising.
That's true. That is true. But they did have the home field where they're very good and they run the ball. They're not killer passing offense anyway. So and they put that story to bed on the first play of the game, I'm pretty sure. So I'll make a bold prediction right now. We're not giving up a deep pass on the first play of the game for a touchdown. We're not doing it. We're not doing it.
Well, so, I mean, all I know is that I hope that Billy Napier learned to kneel on the ball if they're up with 30 seconds to go.
Yeah. I like it. I like that. We'll get Mario's never going to live that down.
And nor should he. Yeah. Nor should he.
Well, we've reached the pinnacle of Miami's season. They get better as the offseason goes every year, but then September comes, end of August comes and they got to actually put it on the field. So they got plenty to prove themselves. So I know there's a lot of hope for them from their side, but these are two young teams with a lot to prove, with two third-year coaches who have not excelled to this point. The storylines are great coming into this, but we'll see which one can take the positive first step to start the season. Stick with Read and Reaction throughout the year. For those of you who want more from us, like Will said, we do have a Patreon page, and we'll be doing some extra stuff on that throughout the fall. So be sure to check us out on Patreon throughout the fall for extra content. For Will, Miles, I'm Nick Knudsen. We'd like to thank the Hightop guys, Shelton and Dave, for coming on. Be sure to check out their stuff too over at Hightop Sports. Have a great game. Have a great week, everybody. Beat Miami. We'll see y'all next week. Go Gators.